When the federal terror alert came through at 6 a.m., everyone expected airport security to follow standard lockdown procedures. Instead, security guard Robert Chen immediately began implementing counter-surveillance protocols with the precision of someone who had spent 12 years as a CIA operative, revealing that their quiet airport employee was actually one of the agency's most decorated counterintelligence specialists. Metropolitan International Airport was beginning another busy Tuesday morning. The 6 a.m. shift was always hectic, early business flights, connecting passengers, and the usual chaos of people trying to navigate security checkpoints while half awake and clutching coffee cups. Robert Chen had been working airport security for 4 years, and he'd developed a rhythm that made him one of the most efficient and respected guards on the morning shift. At 48, he had the kind of calm, professional presence that put nervous travelers at ease while maintaining the alertness that airport security required. To his colleagues, Robert was the guy who never seemed flustered by difficult passengers, always spotted suspicious behavior before it became a problem, and had an almost uncanny ability to read people. His questioning techniques were so effective that supervisors often assigned him to secondary screening when they needed someone who could get honest answers from evasive travelers. To airport management, Robert Chen was their most reliable security professional, punctual, thorough, and possessing what they assumed was natural intuition for detecting potential threats. His background check had shown previous government employment, but in an airport full of former military and law enforcement personnel, that detail hadn't seemed particularly noteworthy. But what none of them knew was that Robert's previous government employment had been 12 years as a CIA counterintelligence operative, specializing in identifying foreign agents, detecting surveillance operations, and preventing international security breaches. The questioning techniques that made him effective at airport security weren't natural intuition. They were advanced interrogation and psychological assessment skills developed in some of the world's most sensitive intelligence operations. As Robert began his morning routine of checking security equipment and reviewing the passenger manifest for his assigned checkpoint, he was operating with a level of situational awareness that his colleagues couldn't have imagined. At exactly 6:47 a.m., Robert's radio crackled with a message that immediately changed the atmosphere throughout Metropolitan International Airport. Attention all security personnel. We have received a credible federal terror threat alert. Effective immediately, implement enhanced security protocols. This is not a drill. Around the checkpoint, Robert watched his colleagues react with the kind of nervous energy that came from suddenly shifting from routine operations to high alert status. TSA officers began checking their procedures manuals, supervisors started making phone calls, and the general mood shifted from casual professionalism to anxious uncertainty. But Robert Chen's reaction was entirely different. The moment the alert came through, Robert's demeanor shifted into what CIA training called operational mode. Without consulting any manual or waiting for additional instructions, he began implementing security protocols that weren't part of standard airport training. "Control, this is Chen at Checkpoint 7, he said into his radio, using a tone that his colleagues later said they didn't recognize. "I need passenger flow rerouted through secondary screening stations. I'm implementing enhanced behavioral assessment protocols." Enhanced behavioral assessment protocols? TSA Supervisor Maria Rodriguez looked at her procedures manual. There was nothing about enhanced behavioral assessment in any training she'd ever received. As Robert moved through his checkpoint area, he was doing something that seemed impossible for an airport security guard. He was turning a standard TSA checkpoint into what looked like a counterintelligence operation. Within 30 minutes of the terror alert, Robert Chen had transformed Checkpoint 7 into something that veteran airport security had never seen before. But instead of creating chaos or confusion, his modifications were making the screening process more efficient while dramatically increasing its effectiveness. "Rodriguez," he called to a newer TSA officer. I need you to position yourself at the document check with direct sightlines to the main concourse. Watch for anyone conducting counter-surveillance, people who seem more interested in our procedures than in getting through security. Counter-surveillance? Officer Rodriguez had been working airport security for 2 years and had never heard that term in any TSA training. As the morning progressed, Robert was implementing techniques that seemed to come from an entirely different level of security training. He was reading passenger behavior patterns, identifying potential surveillance operations, and asking questions that revealed information no standard airport screening would uncover. "Excuse me, sir," Robert said to a passenger whose documents appeared legitimate, but whose behavior had triggered what he recognized as deception indicators. "I notice you're traveling light for a business trip to Dubai. Mind telling me about the conference you're attending?" The questions Robert was asking weren't on any TSA checklist. They were the kind of probing inquiries that intelligence professionals used to verify cover stories and identify potential threats. What amazed experienced airport security like shift supervisor James Walsh was how Robert seemed to know exactly what to look for and how to find it. He was operating at a level of threat assessment that seemed impossible for civilian airport security. "I've worked airport security for 8 years," Walsh confided to his colleague. "I've never seen anything like what Chen is doing. This isn't TSA training. This is something else entirely." By 10 a.m., Robert's checkpoint had identified 3 passengers who required additional federal screening, not because they had weapons or contraband, but because their behavior, documentation, and travel patterns matched profiles that raised legitimate security concerns. Federal agents who arrived to interview these passengers were impressed by the quality of Robert's assessments. His reports contained details about passenger behavior, psychological indicators, and travel pattern analysis that seemed to come from advanced intelligence training. "Who is this guy?" FBI agent Sarah Kim asked Airport Security Supervisor Walsh. "The threat assessments he's providing are more detailed than what we get from agents with years of counterterrorism training." The answer came when Agent Kim ran Robert Chen's name through federal databases. What she found made her understand why Checkpoint 7 was operating at a level that seemed impossible for airport security. Robert Chen wasn't just an airport security guard. He was retired CIA Senior Intelligence Officer Robert Chen, whose 12-year career in counterintelligence had included operations in over 30 countries, the identification of dozens of foreign agents, and expertise in exactly the kind of threat detection that airport security required. "Sir," Agent Kim said when she approached Robert during his break, "I think we need to talk." Robert looked at her with the same steady expression he'd maintained throughout the morning's operations. For 4 years, he had successfully kept his intelligence background quiet, presenting himself as just an experienced security professional with good instincts. But today's terror alert had required him to use skills that were clearly beyond civilian training, and he'd known that his cover story wouldn't survive federal scrutiny. "I suppose you ran my name," he said calmly. "Senior Intelligence Officer Chen," Agent Kim replied. "What are you doing working airport security?" Later that afternoon, as Metropolitan International Airport returned to normal operations and the federal terror alert was downgraded, Robert sat in the airport security office explaining his career transition to a room full of people who were still processing what they had witnessed. 12 years CIA counterintelligence, he confirmed to the assembled group of airport supervisors and federal agents. Specializing in foreign agent identification, surveillance detection, and threat assessment operations. Airport Security Director Linda Martinez was trying to understand how one of the country's most experienced intelligence operatives had ended up working at her TSA checkpoint. "Why didn't you tell us about your background?" "Because," Robert said carefully, "I wanted to be just an airport security guard. After 12 years of tracking foreign agents and preventing international incidents, I wanted a job where I could use my skills without the stakes being national security every day. Agent Kim was reviewing Robert's CIA personnel file on her tablet. Your record shows operations in Afghanistan, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, counterintelligence work in some of the world's most sensitive locations. You were one of the agency's most successful operatives. Robert nodded. And after 12 years of that level of responsibility, I wanted to serve in a way that felt more manageable. But as he looked around the room at faces that ranged from amazed to confused, Robert realized that his quiet career at Metropolitan International was about to become much more complicated. However, he continued, what happened today reminded me that the skills I developed at the agency aren't something I can just turn off, and maybe that's not a bad thing. 2 weeks after the terror alert incident, Robert was called into a meeting that included not just airport management, but representatives from the Department of Homeland Security, the Transportation Security Administration, and the FBI. Robert, the DHS representative, began. Your performance during the terror alert has been reviewed at the highest levels of federal security. We'd like to offer you a position as Regional Airport Security Coordinator, overseeing threat assessment training and counterintelligence protocols for 12 major airports. It was a significant promotion that would allow Robert to use his CIA training to improve airport security across an entire region. Better pay, federal benefits, and the opportunity to implement the kind of advanced threat detection that could prevent terrorist attacks. But as Robert considered the offer, he thought about what had drawn him to airport security in the first place. After 12 years of high-stakes intelligence operations, he had wanted to serve in a way that felt more connected to normal life, more focused on protecting ordinary people going about their daily business. I appreciate the offer, he said finally, but I'd like to make a counter-proposal. The room waited. Let me stay at Metropolitan International as Senior Security Specialist, but also develop training programs that teach these counterintelligence techniques to airport security personnel nationwide. I can create protocols that turn standard TSA checkpoints into effective counterintelligence screening points. The DHS representative looked intrigued. You want to train airport security guards to think like CIA operatives? I want to train them to use observation and assessment techniques that could identify threats before they become incidents, Robert clarified. The skills that make intelligence operatives effective, reading behavior, detecting deception, identifying surveillance, those same skills can make airport security much more effective. 6 months later, Robert Chen was still working at Metropolitan International Airport, but he had also become something more, the developer of advanced threat assessment training that was being implemented at airports across the country. On weekends, Robert taught courses in behavioral analysis, surveillance detection, and counterintelligence awareness to airport security personnel. He helped develop screening protocols that turned routine passenger interactions into sophisticated threat assessment opportunities. But the most important part of Robert's new role happened every morning when he walked through Metropolitan International's security checkpoints, working alongside TSA officers who now saw him differently. They still appreciated his calm professionalism and reliable expertise, but they also carried the confidence that came from knowing their airport was protected by someone with extraordinary skills. "Morning, Mr. Chen," called TSA Officer Martinez as she set up her screening station. "Anything I should watch for today?" Robert smiled. "Same as always, Maria. Read their behavior, trust your instincts, and remember that most people are just trying to get where they're going safely." But as he watched Maria begin her shift with the enhanced awareness that his training had developed, Robert reflected on how much his definition of service had evolved. As a CIA operative, his job had been to identify and neutralize threats to national security. Now, his job was to help other professionals develop the skills to protect travelers and prevent incidents before they happened. The transition from intelligence operations to airport security hadn't been about stepping down from important work. It had been about finding new ways to apply critical skills in service of a different but equally important mission. Today, if you travel through Metropolitan International Airport, you might notice that the security feels different, more thorough without being intrusive, more aware without being suspicious, more professional without being intimidating. The TSA officers ask better questions, notice more details, and seem to have an almost intuitive ability to identify passengers who might need additional attention. They move with confidence that comes from training that goes well beyond standard airport security procedures. And if you look closely at the senior security specialist who coordinates the morning shift with quiet efficiency, you might see something in his bearing that suggests serious training. Robert Chen looks like an airport security guard, works as an airport security guard, and serves as an airport security guard. But underneath that civilian role is someone whose experience with threat detection was developed in some of the world's most sophisticated intelligence operations. Sometimes the most effective security comes not from the most obvious measures, but from the most unexpected expertise. Airport security might seem like a routine job, but when it's performed by someone with advanced counterintelligence training, it becomes something more, a critical line of defense that protects millions of travelers using skills that most people never realize are there. The intelligence community's loss became civilian aviation's gain. Robert Chen's expertise didn't disappear when he left the CIA. It evolved into new forms of service that make air travel safer for everyone, proving that the skills developed in intelligence operations can find meaningful application in protecting the everyday lives of ordinary citizens. What do you think? Have you ever encountered airport security that seemed exceptionally professional? Someone whose questioning techniques and awareness suggested training that went beyond standard procedures? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe to the Veteran Chronicles for more stories of dedicated professionals who continue serving their communities in ways that most people never recognize or fully appreciate.